Can do that. Lynn sent me 9 years.
9 years.
9 long years. This will be my 10th session coming up, and then I can run for one last term, and then in Oklahoma, 12-year term limits, and so that will be at one last term after this next year. And it's gone by rather quickly, but and a lot of people argue term limits, good, bad. 12 years will be plenty long enough for me, I assure you. But it's hard to believe that it was 10 years ago. In fact, we had our watch party in this very room, stood right here the night that election happened. And it's hard to believe. Time passes quickly, and it really is hard to believe that it's been that long. Lynn sent me a message and apologized for a light crowd, but I understand he actually told people that Jana was going to be speaking today on occupational therapy and what she does in the school systems, and so I take no responsibility for the light crowd, because I think he told everyone Jana was coming instead of me. So, I want to take just a few moments to go over some of the things that we did last session, talk about a couple of issues that I think are important that we continue to deal with as a state, and then hopefully there'll be time to answer questions, which probably would be the more interesting thing to do anyway. The last legislative session, which ended in the end of May, and then of course we went back in special session to fix the workers' comp issue after the court overturned that. But we finished last year. It was a very good year economically, and it's no surprise to this part of the state. It was a good year in Oklahoma, good year budget-wise. Our state budget grew by $285 million this year over the previous year, about a 4.2% increase in state spending this year, and that's really where we ended up budget-wise on the positive side. After some difficult years we've gone through in the last several years of budget cuts, so the budget grew by $285 million. Workers' comp reform, obviously a significant issue. We had to go back in special session and fix lawsuit reform, actually. So two separate issues. We went back in special session to address lawsuit reform we'd done in previous years, and then we did pass some workers' comp reform that I'm hopeful we will see workers' comp rates decline. We talk a lot about tax policy, we talk a lot about lawsuit reform, a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, one of the biggest and probably the biggest cost driver for most businesses is workers' compensation insurance and the continued costs there. And I'm not so sure that reforming workers' comp in Oklahoma won't do more for the economy of the state and for businesses, particularly small businesses, to grow than anything else we could do. And so I'm glad we finally got around to doing that, and hopefully those reforms will stand any legal challenges that might come down the pike. We did have to go back in special session to address lawsuit reform. The court found not that there was anything in particular wrong with it, other than the fact that the way it was done. A number of issues were put into one single bill, and sometimes that's done to get people to vote for things they wouldn't otherwise vote for if they were in separate bills. It's called log rolling. You put everything into one, and then you say, well, I don't like a couple of those things, but the other 8 things in there are really good, so I guess I'll have to vote for it, even though I wouldn't typically support these other 2 things. The Oklahoma Constitution is pretty clear that you cannot do that. You cannot do that to coerce members to support something they wouldn't otherwise do. It's really not an issue, and I don't understand why we do it from time to time, and we, quite frankly, did it again this legislative session. It's not like we have a limited number of bills that we can file. Now, in the House, as a member, I can only file 8 bills, but there's an unlimited number that could be filed. Excuse me, I've kind of had a cough this week. So there's no shortage of bills. So there's really no excuse for putting all these things together other than to try to get people to vote for things they wouldn't normally. So we fixed that, passed those bills separately. Thought I was going to make it through this without coughing. What we did this year, though, that I don't understand is that we once again put an income tax cut in place with repairs to the Capitol. The Capitol is in disrepair. It's not been taken care of over the years, and we obviously have some repairs that have to be made there. We put that in a bill to also cut the income tax. I actually voted against that for a couple of different reasons. One, I don't think it's constitutional to put the 2 issues together, and again, there was no reason for it. We could have had 2 separate bills. We don't have a limited number of bills. The Speaker of the House and the Leader of the Senate can introduce a bill at any time, and as many as they want. So, first problem is that. Secondly, and probably even more problematic, is the state currently has a lawsuit that's pending on some of our tax credits. And if we lose that lawsuit, the price tag on that to the state is somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million. We don't know the answer to that. We know that it could go one way or another. but we don't know the answer to that. And passing a tax cut this last session, in my opinion, when we don't know what the cost may be of that case that's pending, did not seem like a responsible time to do that. And so I voted against that, not because I don't think we need to be continuing to look at our tax burden with Kansas making significant cuts, although I think they're going to get in some financial trouble over what they've done. Texas has no income tax, but they tax all kinds of services, from diaper services to lawn services to, you name it in Texas, it's taxed. They don't have an income tax, but the money comes from somewhere. I just did not think, with the information we had, which the information we had was we don't know what the cost is going to be of this lawsuit if we're going to win or lose the lawsuit. And if we do, we know it's going to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. In my opinion, that was not a responsible time to be doing a tax cut. So that was my reasoning for opposing that this last legislative session. We continue to work on shoring up our retirement systems and pensions. We're going to continue to work on that. There's a huge unfunded liability there that the state has in our retirement systems. We're making progress. They're healthier than they've been in a long time, but we still have a lot of work to do in that area. So those are some of the bigger issues of this session. I was pleased that I did have a bill signed by the governor that was significant to our schools across the state, and that was a school deregulation bill, something we've been working on for several years. In fact, in the 9 years that I've been in the legislature, one of the things I've heard from schools over and over again is, well, if we didn't have to follow these mandates that charter schools are exempt from, we could do some of the great things that they do too. The bill that I got signed by the governor this session allows public schools to be deregulated from many of those mandates that charter schools are also exempt from. Your local board of education makes application to the State Department to be deregulated from whatever the mandate might be that they don't think makes sense for Alva. It may be a mandate that makes total sense in Jinx or in Ardmore or in Idabel, but it doesn't make sense in Alva or Winoka or Freedom. And the local school board can then make application to be deregulated from that mandate. There's a long list of those mandates, and we were able to get that signed into law. And it really gives a little more authority and local control to our school boards, administrators, teachers, and communities to make decisions about what works and what doesn't work in your school district versus a one-size-fits-all across the board. And so I was pleased that we finally got that after several years of trying, got that signed by the governor. I think perhaps one of my greatest concerns isn't so much the things that we did do in the last legislative session, it was what we didn't do in the last legislative session. We continue to ignore a crisis in our corrections system in this state. We are at over 100% capacity in our state prisons. We are under 60% staffed, which is a recipe for disaster. We made it through the summer months without burning any of our prisons down or having a riot or having any of our officers or inmates killed for that matter. But quite frankly, we're not far away from that being possible. When you talk about being over 100% capacity and at 60% staffing, particularly in some of our facilities like at Fort Supply and Helena that really weren't designed to be prisons, we've kind of added to and changed them over the years to meet that mission. Bill Johnson was designed to be a prison, and so the technology and the way it's built is a little more conducive to not having as many staff. But we continue to ignore a crisis there, particularly in our area when you're paying $11.83 an hour for correctional officers, and you can go make 3 times that in the oil field and not have to deal with a bunch of buckleheads. I'm quite frankly surprised we have any employees left at our prison. I keep worrying Janice is going to call me on some Friday and say, "Do you mind stopping by? I'm the only one here, and I need to run home and fix dinner, and we've got some family coming in. Could you just come watch the guys for a few hours?" And it really is amazing. We have some very dedicated employees in corrections, and particularly in this part of the state. And we have to do something to address the shortage. It's not just that we're not getting qualified applicants. It's not that the warden puts an ad in the paper and the people that come in. And in many cases that you do have people that come in, they may not be able to pass a drug test, or there may be some other issue why you can't hire them. It's not even that. It's that the warden is putting ads in the paper and they're getting 0 applications. It's not even that we're getting unqualified people. We're getting no one applying for many of these jobs in many cases. And the governor's position this year was, well, we need to do a study. Well, when you put an ad in the paper and you have no applicants, that tells me that I don't need a study. We're not paying enough to even get someone to apply for these jobs, particularly in this area where the economy is good and there's opportunities. But it's not even just in northwest Oklahoma. It's across the state in our correctional facilities. We're just not competitive at $11.83 an hour, and we're going to have to address that. My hope is we address it before someone gets killed, that we don't have a correctional officer that leaves and goes to work. We really shouldn't put our state employees in that situation, but we have. they leave and go to work and tuck their kids into bed at night, and hopefully they come home the next day. If something doesn't change, someone is going to get killed. Literally, it is a life and death situation. And it sounds really strange to say, but if we only lose one correctional officer, or if we only have one inmate killed, we'll be lucky in the situation that we have in many of our prisons in the state. We'll be fortunate if we only lose one person. It should not take the loss of a mom or a dad, a state employee, in order for us to act. And the blame is on us at the Capitol for not addressing this. And my hope is that we get serious about this next session. We have a critical shortage of state troopers. It's not at crisis level like we are in corrections. We have a critical shortage of state troopers. We're going to have to address that. There are now 16 police departments that you can make more money than being a state trooper. It used to be the OHB was the top job in law enforcement that law enforcement professionals aspired to be in. You now can make more in Woodward, Oklahoma as a police officer. With a recent raise they did, you can make more as a police officer in Woodward than you can as a state trooper. And you're in Woodward. You know where you're going to live. You don't have to worry about, am I going to get assigned to Idabel or Boise City or Oklahoma City, or where am I going to be? You know you're going to be in Woodward. And if you get in trouble, help is only literally minutes away. You're not going to be on a stretch of highway where if you get in a situation, help's only 30 minutes away if you're lucky, and you're by yourself. So we're going to have to do something to address that. We don't have the luxury there. When you call star 55 or you call from help when you're on a state highway, we don't have the opportunity really to tell you, well, could you call back between 8 and 5 Monday through Friday? We'll have someone available then. That's just not how it works. There are certain services that we have to have people available, and we're down about a couple hundred troopers right now. About a third of the department could walk out today and retire if they chose to. So it is critical that we address the shortage of state troopers. And then DHS. We've heard a lot of talk about DHS. We have not been able to address the shortage of caseworkers, the frontline people that really are dealing with some of the most vulnerable, children and elderly and others, and that's an issue that we're going to have to address. We have a shortage of caseworkers there. Our caseworkers are handling too many cases. Things are falling through the cracks. And quite frankly, one child dying in state custody is too many, and we've had more than one. We're under a court order there. We're not far away from being under a court order in corrections, and we're not that far removed from being under federal control of our prison system. Many of you in this room may remember the stories not that long ago that the federal government ran the prison system in Oklahoma because we didn't. I don't think we need the federal government coming in here running our corrections system. But if we don't, and we talk a lot at the Capitol about, we're going to stand up to the federal government. Well, if we don't address something, we're one lawsuit away or one phone call to the Justice Department away from them taking over the prison system in Oklahoma again. When they do that, you, the people of Oklahoma, lose control of a large part of your budget. And it's the same thing that we did in DHS in the court order we have now. They come in and they say, you will spend X amount of dollars on DHS. That comes off the top. And if there's anything left, then you can spend it on schools or roads and bridges or Medicaid or whatever the public safety, you pick, but you will spend X amount of dollars. If that happens in corrections, the same thing will happen. There will be a federal judge that will decide the state budget. The federal judge will say, you will spend X amount of dollars on corrections and you will do A, B, C, and D. You will get your staffing levels at this point. You will build a facility. You will spend money on capital improvements, whatever it may be. We no longer have a say. The people you elect to represent you and set priorities and set the state budget no longer have a say. It's a federal judge somewhere that decides you will spend X amount of dollars on corrections. And then whatever's left, then we can sprinkle it around other places. I don't think we want to lose that authority, but if we don't do something, we're not that far away because of the situation our prisons are in, of being in the same boat we're in DHS. And we still haven't met all the requirements of the court order on DHS. We're struggling to get where we need to be there. And then lastly, teachers. There's no, I'm not talking about just salary, I'm just talking about the shortage. We have a shortage of teachers. We can't find teachers. I know for a fact, and I know we have several school districts. The largest school district in my legislative district is Woodward, Oklahoma. Population, 12,000, 13,000 people, a good labor pool available in Woodward, Oklahoma. Last school year, the Woodward superintendent told me that he went through the school year with 3 open positions, teaching positions. He never could find anyone to fill in Woodward, Oklahoma. Now, if you can't fill 3 spots in Woodward, how are you going to fill spots in Alva or Freedom or Winoka or Cherokee or Fairview or anywhere else where you don't have 13,000, 14,000 people to draw from? It is a critical issue. And again, I don't think that's totally a pay issue. And we've done a couple of teacher raises since we've done state employee raises. So when the money does become available, we'll have to address some of our state employee issues first. We just don't have the number of people going into education that we need to fill the jobs, not just in Oklahoma but nationally, and that's something that we're going to have to deal with in the future, just to have the numbers to fill those jobs. Again, it's not lack of applicants; it's no applicants in many cases, from what I'm hearing from school administrators. So where are we going into to next session? The revenues in the state seem to be leveling off or dipping. We had some good months. We're kind of going on the opposite direction. It looks like maybe that all averages out to a flat budget, that there will be no new money next session, but there will not necessarily be any cuts next session. It just appears like our economy is slowing a little bit, and we won't know for sure. We'll watch it, but our agencies basically have been told, prepare for a flat budget. Don't prepare for any increases in spending. You will have increases, obviously, in health insurance costs and utilities as fixed costs that go up that we don't have any control over. But there may not be any money to pay for that, so you may have to make cuts to just make up the difference there. We are really preparing for a flat budget going into to next session. What issues are looming? Water is a big issue that's looming. We did have a court ruling there on Texas trying to buy water in Oklahoma. Water continues to be a big issue. If you don't believe me, you can walk right behind that wall, and the mayor of Fairview and their city engineer and the city manager, the Major County Rural Water District folks, are sitting at a table over here because they're up here touring reverse osmosis plants that have been put in because they have an issue to deal with water, high nitrates. If you haven't dealt with a water issue in your community yet, you will be. The EPA has changed the standards on nitrates. There's going to be a lot of money that's going to have to be spent on infrastructure. Water is going to be a very, very important commodity, important issue, and a lot of the fights that we've seen over the years on oil and gas and other things may be even more heated when it comes to water. It's already happened in other states. It's getting here now. We have the tribes as a complicating factor in the water issue here. But we also have the fact that we're dumping a lot of water into the Red River that once it hits the Red River is not usable by anyone. Is there a way that we can sell that water? Is there a way we can sell it to Texas and not be locked in when we need it in Oklahoma that we can't get it back? The water lawyers and experts I talk to say yes. You put them on a renewable permit that every 10 years they have to reapply, and they know that at the end of that 10 years, you can't shut them off before that, but at the end of the 10 years the permit's not renewed because we need the water in Oklahoma. We have to find a way to fund the infrastructure to move water around the state. It's very expensive, and we can't afford to do it with the resources we have. We're not a wealthy state. The money's not there. Could we sell water to Texas or whoever it may be and fund the ability to build some pipelines to move water to western Oklahoma where we desperately need it? Could we sell water and have the money to build additional lakes and reservoirs to store water for when we need it? Those are all things we're going to have to be looking at, and how we pay for that. Water will be a significant issue. We did get some changes made to the Water Resources Board. It previously was drawn on congressional lines, which really hurt our representation now that our congressional district includes part of Oklahoma City and part of Tulsa. And Senator Marlette worked on that issue. We were able to get a bill passed to make that a regional issue. The Panhandle uses a significant amount of water and had no representatives until recently on the water board. So we have made some progress, hopefully, there that will be helpful. And you need not drive much farther than Canton Lake to see what happens when we're not responsible with the water. Canton Lake is still 13 feet, even with the rain we've received, 13 feet below where it should be. Oklahoma City took water, again, that they had every right to take. I don't think anyone argued that. The argument was, could you wait a couple more weeks until the spring rains start and see what happens? Sure enough, they take the water out of Canton Lake. It starts raining in Oklahoma City, not in the river basin to feed Canton Lake, and Oklahoma City ends up releasing more water downstream to Lake Eufaula than they ever took from Canton Lake. And Canton Lake remains 13 feet below. A lot of my Oklahoma City and urban colleagues don't understand why they should be concerned about whether Canton Lake has water in it or not, as long as they have the water they need and could take it when they wanted it. What I've told them is, we have nothing else to send you now. That's why you should be concerned about when you take it, because once you take it, it's gone. There is nothing else. There is no way for us to get you additional water from your reservoir at Canton Lake. That's why you should be concerned about it, is because you have used everything you have. And that was lost in the stories. The people of Oklahoma City were never really told that we've now taken everything we have in our reservoir, Canton, that there is nothing else to send. That never really was part of the story, and in my mind, it was the biggest part of the story. What is Oklahoma City doing to make sure they're being responsible with the water? Not because we want to go down and put a boat on Canton Lake and go fishing or water skiing or whatever it may be. The Oklahoma City folks need to be concerned because that's their storage, and it's now empty for the most part. Lastly, we've heard a lot of talk about judges at the state capitol and activist courts, and the Supreme Court overturning some of this legislation that's log rolling, legislators getting mad. I don't think that we can blame the court for us not doing what the Constitution tells us to do when we have an unlimited number of bills. And I don't know that we need to insert any more politics than we already have into our judicial races. And so I don't know that we really need to make any changes in how we appoint judges. The governor makes appointments. We have a judicial nominating commission that selects people that are qualified for those positions. I know it's popular to beat up on activist judges, particularly nationally, federal courts, and there may be some reason to do that. But in terms of in Oklahoma, I don't know that we can really blame the court for when the legislature doesn't follow the Constitution. So I know there's going to be some talk about what changes we make there and how we kind of punish the judiciary. I don't think that's an area we need to wade into. The other thing, and Larry asked me about this on the Medicaid expansion and the medical issue, somewhat related to Obamacare. I am very concerned. We did get a reprieve on Insure Oklahoma. The legislature did nothing, once again, to address the crisis in Insure Oklahoma. Many of you may use that in your small businesses to provide health care to your employees. It's a very popular program that's worked in Oklahoma. But because the governor didn't do the Medicaid expansion, the Obama administration didn't sign off on approving Insure Oklahoma for another year. They were able to negotiate, and just in the last several weeks, we did get a one-year reprieve. We'll have Insure Oklahoma for another year, but Oklahoma is going to have to do some things to address the insurance issue in that area, because I don't know that we'll get more than a year. The Medicaid expansion and the way that we have not shown leadership on the issue concerns me for this reason. And it's not because I think Obamacare is a good law. I think it's very problematic. Are there some things in it that aren't bad? Yes, you can find some good things in it. I think it'll ultimately collapse under its own weight. And I don't know that our party, the Republican Party, managed the government shutdown as they should have with no strategy. And I think you had Tom Cole and you even had Tom Coburn trying to actually say that. Here's the issue with the Medicaid expansion, and this is why I'm concerned. It's not because I think we need to do everything Obamacare has in place in that. The problem, and it was very crafty with the way that bill was put together, the money that our hospitals, in particular our rural hospitals, have received for decades has come through this door over here, let's just say. The federal dollars that our hospital has gotten, Share Medical Center, the Fairview Hospital, the Enid, Woodward, O'Keene, Shad, just go on down the list. The rural hospitals, their federal funding has come through this door. With the Obamacare legislation, this money that we've gotten, federal money for decades, was moved. And this door was closed, and it was rerouted through the Obamacare door. Same money we've been getting is now coming through the Obamacare door. By not participating in the Medicaid expansion, we basically said that money that we've gotten for decades for our hospitals, we're not going to accept because it's now coming through the Obamacare. It's the same money, and that's where my rub has come. It's the money that we've taken for forever. It's your tax money that you pay on April 15th to the federal government. It's the same money, and we're not taking that. The Oklahoma Hospital Association tells me because of that, a third of the hospitals in Oklahoma will close. And they're not talking about Enid, and they're not talking about Woodward, and they're not talking about Oklahoma City. And they have a list. I've seen it. It starts with Share Medical Center in Alva, and it includes Fairview, and it includes O'Keene, and it includes Shattuck. It's our rural hospitals that primarily provide emergency care until you can get moved in an emergency situation to other places. That's my concern there, and I hope we can find a way to address that, because it's as Larry was just asking me, what does that mean? It means about $10,000 a month to Share Medical Center, for example, here in Alva. I don't know what the solution is. It's just my opinion that it doesn't make much sense if it's money we've taken for forever, because it's now coming through the door that is marked Obamacare. We're not going to participate in that. We've got to find a way to make sure we have access points in our rural communities, however we do that. And if we're not going to take the money we've taken for forever, we've got to come up with another plan. And that's where my concern is we don't have another plan. And we can't afford to lose a third of the hospitals in this state, particularly when you're talking about at least a couple in the legislative district I represent. And so that's why I've shared concerns about that. It's a very real issue. And I'm not going to weigh in or wonder in. I know you all have a sales tax vote, and that's up to this community to decide for or against how you deal with your hospital issue. That's not a state issue, and it's not for me to say you need to do something one way or another. Larry just asked me about that, and I'm just telling you it's a very real threat to a third of the hospitals in Oklahoma. That includes the one in Alva, it includes the one in Fairview, it includes O'Keene, Shadow. You just go on the list of any small rural hospital. Woodward's big enough; they're probably fine. But it impacts them. It's a very real threat to our rural hospitals, the funding issue, and again, the state needs to worry about how we address that, and if local communities want to address it, they can. The Fairview Hospital's struggling as well. They don't have any type of a sales tax for operations to support their facility, and I know that the administrators called me on a number of occasions concerned about this very issue, and Candace has called me over the last several months about this issue because it is critical for those facilities. There are a couple of elections coming up, and again, as I mentioned, I'll be running one final time. The one race that's getting a lot of attention right now is state school superintendent. There are a lot of candidates running for state superintendent. Dr. Barisi is running for re-election there, and at this point I'm not picking a side or getting involved in that race either. I'm just telling you it's an important race, and I would encourage you all as community leaders to be involved in statewide races like that impact your community, and that's one that's going to be interesting to watch. The state superintendent's running for re-election. Dr. Barisi, Joy Hoffmeister, who was appointed to the State Board of Education by Governor Fallon, resigned to run for state superintendent as a Republican. So you have a couple of, at least two and maybe more candidates on the Republican side. There's 4 or 5 Democrats running. And again, if you think Dr. Barisi's done a good job and you like if she's done what she told you she'd do, then you need to get involved and you need to support her. If you want to change there, you need to get involved and support Joy Hoffmeister or someone else that's running. Again, I'm not going to take a position politically other than to say this. I don't think, as long as Barack Obama is in the White House, that a Democrat will win a statewide office. So that race and any other race that develops, in my opinion, will be decided in the primary. The governor's up for re-election at 70% approval ratings, and no sign of anyone even challenging her on either side. I don't see that there'll be much of a race there. But again, even 6 months is an eternity in politics, so it'll be interesting to watch and see how all these things shape out. I'll stop there. If there's a couple of quick questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them, or stick around and answer questions. Jim?
Yeah, back to that money that's going a different direction here. First of all, we do use that plan, and we were told that it's only good until July, that we don't have to use it. I mean, we got that in writing, unless they change something. And then secondly, is it just that Fallon had the right to say we don't want that money? I mean, surely there's enough people that if they didn't agree with that decision, they could have changed that.
You're exactly right. There's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, you've got to have the support of the majority of the legislature, the House and the Senate. So yeah, I mean, we can always wire around the governor, but the majority of members were not interested in doing it. And it is expensive. You do get a large part of the money from the federal government. The concern was, will that dry up and the state's left holding the bag with the cost? The experts I've talked to say no, that's not going to happen. So the concern was, is this too much for the state to be able to afford down the road? The other is the political reality. I mean, you have a lot of people that are more concerned about politics in their own race than what do we need to do that's best. And as you have, and I've had this libertarian group from Oklahoma City has been calling a number of our legislative districts, trying to find people to run against incumbents because we're too liberal. They've been robocalling my district. Some of you may have gotten phone calls from them as well, trying to find people to run because we're all too liberal, and they want people to challenge us. They're from the Tea Party side or the Libertarian side. So you have the political side of people that we're not going to vote for anything that is even remotely somewhat on the tinge, tiny little bit might be connected to Barack Obama because we don't have to defend that in an election. Someone could use it against us. My belief has always been, and it's gotten me in trouble from time to time with the Republican leadership, the governor, or whoever, I don't work for a specific party when I'm elected. I don't work for the leadership of the Capitol or the governor. I work for 37,000 people who live in Northwest Oklahoma, District 58. And if I vote the way that is best, in my opinion, or that I've been communicated by those constituents, then the politics takes care of itself. Now, not all people are. Some people are more into politics, some are more into policy, and I'm more of a policy person. But I think if you do the right thing, the politics takes care of itself. I also think if you do the right thing and you get beat, then that's fine too. That's not. I'm down there to serve, and at any point when the people in this area decide they want to make a change, then they have that right to make. I don't own this seat, and they have a right to make a change. Sometimes you have to do what's right, and if there's a political price to pay for it, then that's what you do. And so. The answer to the question is yes, there are more people that could be involved in that decision than just the governor. The blame doesn't just go on the governor. But it's a very real issue. And I don't have any problem with us saying, no, we're not going to participate in this program because we have concerns if we have another plan. We don't have another plan. There's no way to prop up a third of the hospitals in the state. I don't know how we afford to do that. I'm just saying this is money we've always taken just because it's coming through a door that's marked Obamacare. It seems a little strange to me that we won't at least find a way to accept the money that we've taken. I don't have a problem saying no if we have a plan. No one has a plan right now. And that's very concerning to those of us that live in rural Oklahoma that rely on medical care. Try to recruit a business or industry to a town without a hospital. We went through that in Cherokee, where I grew up, after the hospital closed. They're fortunate to have the federal health care center there now, and that building occupied, but still not a hospital. And there are a lot of businesses and industry that aren't going to locate somewhere that doesn't at least have an emergency room. It's more than just health care. It has an economic impact on your community if you lose your hospital, and it makes it very difficult for you to attract business and industry and grow your community. So that's why I'm concerned about it. And there's plenty of blame. We need to figure out a way to address it, though, and not worry about the blame. Anything else?
Do you want to comment on the Randy Terrell issue?
No, I want to comment on the Randy Terrell issue. I would say this, and I didn't know how things would come out yesterday and heard the verdict last night. I would just say this. There's no question that Representative Terrell did what he was accused of doing. Quite frankly, there was no question because he was telling all of us about it as he was doing it. So there was no question there. The question was, did it rise to the level of a felony bribe? That was the question. It wasn't, did this happen or did it not happen? It obviously happened. Did it rise to the level of felony bribery? And obviously a criminal jury, which has a unanimous threshold, after 4 hours of deliberating, unanimously agreed that it did. And so that question has now been answered. It'll be appealed, and we'll see where that goes. But there never, in my mind, and in those of the Capitol, was any question of, did this happen? The question was, does it qualify as felony bribery? And you had a jury unanimously last night said that it did.
Would you say it's, I understand, probably not common, but not uncommon for something like that to happen?
I think that's a very good question. And I would answer it this way. I would say that for some members, it's not uncommon at all for that to happen. And for other members, absolutely not. And it's my opinion that that's not why we're there and how you do business. And I'm the chairman now of the committee that Representative Terrell was chairing when all of this happened. And so I have the medical examiner's office under my committee, as well as corrections and public safety and all of those committees. So can it happen? Does it happen? Sure, it does. The opportunity's there. And that's why it's so important to be involved in elections and make sure that you send people to the Capitol that won't be tempted by that or change that. And quite frankly, I mean, it's the same in any business. There's an opportunity for people to take advantage of the situation they're in, whether it's embezzling money or taking stuff out the back door, or whatever it may be. That can happen anywhere. It shouldn't happen at the Capitol. The opportunity's there. It obviously has happened. And does it happen? Yes. Will your state representative be involved in that in the last 9 years or in the next 3? No. Because I just don't believe that's how you do business, and I don't believe that that's why you're sent there. My opinion has always been that You can agree or disagree with me, but I'm never going to do anything. I'm going to try to never do anything to embarrass the 37,000 people that represent me, and that you're not going to see me on the front page of the newspaper or on TV for doing something that embarrasses the people that have sent me down there to do a job. Not everybody sees it that way, and there are some people that operate on the margins and on the edges, and sometimes it catches up with you. I hope this is a message now to those that like to operate on the margins that that's not how business should be done. But we've seen it with Democrats, Republicans. I don't think either party has a corner on the issue, because this is not the first political trial that we've seen. I hope the message is sent not only to legislators but to lobbyists and others that are involved in this, that the light of day and public scrutiny is something that should be a part of the legislative process. Bill?
I just want to say thank you for maintaining the principle in all of this.
Amen.
You're kind to say that.
Even in the face of adversity from the powers that
I appreciate you saying that.
I think it's a moving target all the time, and I understand there are those who do anything and change anything just to stay in power. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying it. It can be frustrating, and this last session with some of the issues that fall under my committee we didn't address were frustrating when there were other things that were being addressed that really were more political than things that needed done. And people say, does the Capitol change you? I don't think it does. I don't think going into politics and serving the people changes you. I think it maybe brings out your true colors. And so if you send someone down there that is a little bit prone to operate on the margins, they're probably going to operate on the margins. And if you send someone down there that doesn't, they're probably not. And a lot of people say, well, does politics really change you? I don't think it changes you, but I think it definitely magnifies your morals, your ethics, your principles, your true colors, and more so than changes you. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least in my personal experience and with the legislators I've worked with from all over the state, I think you get to see people's true colors. I don't know that it really changes you, but if you're prone to that, there's an opportunity there, in my opinion. Well, I appreciate all of you in this room and the leadership roles you provide in the community, and thanks for being interested. I mean, we do things every day that, as much as we like to think, oh, it doesn't really affect me, it does. I mean, Troy can tell you the fights we've been through with optometrists and ophthalmologists and the impact that could have in healthcare in rural areas. I had an issue this session, and Kirk can talk to you about it, or Mark, on franchises on auto dealerships. We didn't get that deal done, but a lot of these auto manufacturers can come in and can tell Kirk or Mark that you're going to spend, I don't know, however many hundreds of thousands of dollars on changing the tile in your showroom and putting up a new sign and changing the facade, and then come back in 3 years and tell you again. And we've tried to address those things that impact businesses and people in Oklahoma. Oil and gas industry.
That's why we lost Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah, KFC. That's and I use Kirk as an example of franchise. KFC is another franchise. You come in and say you got to do ABC, and you can't afford to do that. Dairy Queen's gone. Oil and gas. I mean, there are things we're doing during the session that affect mineral owners and ultimately jobs here. So I appreciate the people in this room recognizing the fact that those things matter and paying attention and asking questions and being involved very much, because I realize that it's not a game, and we are making decisions at the Capitol that affect real people and real livelihoods and real employees and real families, and there are people that do see it more of it's just the game of politics or the sport of politics, and it's not. What we're doing there, whether it's corrections reform or it's optometry, ophthalmology, it affects real people and real lives. And I appreciate you all trusting me with the privilege to get to go down and represent you. It's a privilege I take very seriously, and it's an honor to get to do it. So thank you very much to each of you.
What's it going to take to get Jana to come and talk to us?
Well, probably just a phone call from you and tell her what I said about her, and then she'll probably be here at the next meeting for rebuttal time.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeff. I was going to say I was down at the Capitol a couple of months ago, and I saw brick falling off. I thought, my God, this house is going to fall down. So I'm glad that they are repairing it, because I certainly wouldn't want any of you legislators to get hit on the head with a falling brick.
I have a list.
So, okay, if there's no further thing, we'll adjourn.